fellas. One, two, three, four.
So let's dive right into it. I lined up my audio tracks in the meantime. So basic plugins. I would use an equalizer and a compressor, maybe a limiter and a gate in all of the tracks, and then a master equalizer and master compressor and or limiter in the master track, just to make everything sound nice and level out the levels. So I use the basic stuff for now. I usually would go for third-party plugins, but to keep it simple and nice and clean for you guys, I try to use the standard stuff that comes with Audition, and you can get away with it actually. So basically, at first, the equalizer. I use it first in the track to get rid of like low frequencies or frequencies that might interfere with my level and compressor settings, and that's really important, especially if you work with voice-over tracks and recordings of voice that can make a difference. So basic equalizer, and then in terms of compressor, well, the basic dynamics processing and Audition, I'm not a fan of that thing, not because it sounds bad, just because it's a little bit tricky to set up, especially if you don't have any experience in that field. That's a little bit tricky, but you have other options that come with Audition, and in this case is the single band compressor or even the tube modded compressor. That actually is kind of nice. Still a little bit tricky and works a little bit different. I show you later how you can work maybe with a third-party plugin that gets you there better, quicker and smoother. So basically I set it up for both kind of tracks. I go with the tube modded compressor. I keep the master fader untouched for now. So okay, let's look into settings. Basic settings for your equalizer. We have the 30 to 100 Hertz area. That's all the low end. If you want to go for a trailer voice, you can increase there, but especially if you have a lot of rumble sounds and kicks and pops and plops, you kind of have to low cut all those out, and basically that cleans up stuff for your edit and mix session quite a lot. Then you have the 200 to 500 area. That's the area for the muffled sound, so that can help you out there. And then you have the 1K to 3K and sometimes even up to 8K area that can make stuff sound harsh, but the other way around, it can make the sound of the voice more clear. And then 6, 8 and 10K, that's the nice sounding transparent sound for a voice or instrument and stuff like that. Everything above that can make it a little bit noisy. So with that plugin, you have to keep in mind you have to make subtle adjustments, because it can sound a little bit tricky and the overall interface can trick you in, well, I just increased the levels, and by that, oh boy, 24, that's too much. 10 dB should be the maximum. Just a little bit adjustments like 5 or 4 is good. You can adjust the range to give you better feedback of what you do. So I do that. So basically I have a preset for Christopher, just to make sure I don't spend too much time here. As I said, I'm not quite as familiar with that plugin, so it kind of is tricky to match other plugins I have set up already, but that's the basic idea. Lots of low cut to get rid of plop sounds, and yeah, a little bit of the harshness of his mic is in that area, and then I increased like the 10K area and the a 3 to 5K area is a little bit difficult for his microphone, and a little bit of the muffled mumbled sound, just to make it a little bit sound nicer. And that way, actually, if you cut out a lot of those frequencies here, you kind of push the low frequency in that area as well. So even though you have a low cut going on, you can get a little bit of that low frequency back in that area to kinda have a little bit more of a voice over trailer voice. So yeah, that works quite nicely for that voice. Keep in mind, that's just a basic idea what an equalizer can work and what area it can work. You always have to judge that by your monitors, audio speakers. You kind of have to get familiar with those and change those settings. Not every setting works for every voice. It's like an individual setup. So the next thing is the compressor. In this case, that compressor really is a little bit tricky to set up. Here I have as well a setting. You actually can start with the voiceover settings. That is actually a good way to start, but because of Christopher's levels are a little bit low, I had to go in a little bit more. The threshold where the compressor starts, the gain that pushes the levels up, the ratio as well, quite intense here, and the attack and release time, well, yeah, it can be good to have long attack and long release time. In this case, that thing goes really high. That can be a little bit tricky as well. So, well, in that area, it should be okay, 30 milliseconds and like 200, something like that. You have to really listen to it, what it does with your sound and your voice recording. Every voice recording is a little bit different, every mic, every voice, how much distance the person that speaks into the mic has to the mic, and if he is changing the position like I do now, that can be tricky for the compressor. So yeah, that should work. But if you are not happy with the sound, you also could go with the single band compressor. There's a nice voiceover preset as well. I have a vocal setup here as well here. It's the, yeah, well, especially with Christopher's track, low threshold, high ratio, attack time. In this case, with that compressor, I can go a little bit longer as well as with the release, because it's a more normal compressor. With the tube modded, yeah, it works a little bit different. It's more of a saturation going on in there, and so therefore it could be tricky. Even though it sounds nicer, it can be trickier to set it up actually. So I go with that. I go with my preset I made, and then I have to deactivate the tube modded compressor, and just to be safe, I go ahead and make a hard limiter for that as well, and just make it like -1, and maybe even boost the input a little bit more. The rest is okay like that. Quick release is good for that plugin, and also the look ahead time. That's basically the time that that plugin looks in front of your playhead, and if there's a peak, it kind of knows what to do before it actually works. So yeah, it's a little bit tricky. So with that kind of setup, you're good to go in a way. We have a quick listen to what's going on.
So interesting bit of information. I found out that Michael does in fact use our Voodoo Clap to line everything. I mean, he does use it as like a general reference, and then he'll, like, you know, Yeah, but he does it entirely about eye. He doesn't do it through a plugin or anything, or like pluralize or what have you. Yeah.
So as you can hear, it might sound with that plugin a little bit, and I just set this thing up really quickly. I lost a little bit of the low end because I know there will be some plop sounds in Christopher's track further on. Yeah, and so yeah, I kind of think that works. I played with that part without all plugins.
Yeah, but he does it entirely about eye. He doesn't do it through a plugin or anything, or like pluralize or what have you.
With the equalizer and the single band compressor.
Yeah, but he does it entirely about eye. He doesn't do it through a plugin or anything, or like pluralize or what have you.
And then I have the hard limiter as well.
Yeah, but he does it entirely about eye. He doesn't do it through a plugin or anything, or like pluralize or what have you.
So what I could do here is also make a adjustment with the volume level fader thingy. Because if I go in and make more dramatic changes in the compressor, I could add up with issues with breath sounds and stuff like that. I actually could boost the input level here a little bit more, maybe not that much.
Yeah, but he does it entirely about eye. He doesn't do it through a plugin or anything, or like pluralize or what have you.
So that works actually. And that's the basic settings for any voice. I would do that for Maggie's track as well, but yeah, I save a little bit of time. What I do next is basically I go ahead and make a adjustment in the master track as well. I go ahead and choose a equalizer as well, and I could use a compressor, but for this time actually a hard limiter is good for now as well. And keep in mind, set the range to 30 just to make sure you don't do too much. And here I go and increase the level there, and maybe a little bit of a low boost, just a little bit, nothing too fancy. Just the basic setup here, a little bit more there, and I could go ahead and yeah, you get the idea, just a basic. So that's that. And the master, well, so for ruining it for everyone, we have like a -6 master level, because that's actually the reference level for MP3 delivery. And so therefore I set my limiter to -6, and I could increase the boost a little bit just to make it a little bit more tighter, especially if a lot of tracks going on and you have a lot of people changing position to mics and stuff like that. You can even that out with a little bit more of an input boost. But yeah, you have to keep in mind and always check with your ears.
Yeah. Yeah, but he does it entirely about eye. He doesn't do it through a plugin or anything, or like pluralize or what have you. Yeah,
Yeah, and as you can see, we have a perfect -6 level, and also that way we compress it even a little bit more. Check with your ears, as I said. If it sounds too compressed, it might be good to lower that boost as well. Yeah, so that works as well. It always comes to how you set up all your levels and stuff like that, and a matter of taste in the end. How does it sound? Does it sound too compressed and stuff like that? But yeah, that's the basic stuff you should get away with. So -6, back to that. It's always a good point to be safe as well, to not have too much clipping going on, especially for MP3. So I go ahead and just show you what I do in my real session. I open that up. As you can see, quite a few edits. There you go. That's a 2-hour show. A lot of edits and little level changes over time here and there. I go into that So what I have here is the basic setup I have for this session. As you can see, quite a few plugins going on. I have like the Waves noise reduction, because that actually sounds good, and if you use the noise reduction inside of Audition, yeah, that can work as well, but you have to be a little bit more careful what settings you have and what you do, because you can get that metallic delay sound of thing that goes on with that, but it works actually as well. Anyway, then I have Alloy 2. That actually is a really good plugin if you work in podcasts and voiceover stuff. It might not be the best sounding plugin out there. It can sound a little bit harsh, and the limiter is sometimes a little bit tricky, and it sounds a little bit clippy, even though it doesn't clip. But anyway, you have all the essential stuff in there. A good equalizer with good feedback, as you can see here.
We want to talk about Ray Harryhausen and his life and all of that. And I think that would be...
As you can see, you can spot frequencies that are not really good, or you have to change. And as you can see, I have my setup here. Lots of low cut, a little bit increase there, muffled sound here, a little bit of voice enhancement, and here I get rid of the harsh sound of the mic. And the most essential thing of that plugin actually is the dynamics, because you have a good compressor with mid-range and slow attack and a slowy release time. As you can see, I'm in the 200 area. That works for that voice. Good. And you can see a 3.1 ratio and almost 10 dB levels. And then the essential part is the gate, because if you have like a silent moment when Maggie talks, that is the case here, it actually does a good thing. It closes down the track, so to speak. It essentially does the following.
Have struck gold, basically.
The magic. They put the magic in Magic Lantern.
Yeah, quite magic indeed. So,
as you can see, it closes down the track. Essentially, what I would do is that, volume down. But if I had to do that for every gap, so to speak, in these 2 hours, I would go crazy. So that plugin helps most of the time if there's a really loud door banging or something like that. Everything basically what is on the same level as the voice of Christopher, it wouldn't work. Therefore, I have to go in as I did here. I'll show you in a minute how I work with that kind of stuff, and fade in, fade out by hand. But this is an essential plugin, and you can use the limiter as well. I use a different plugin for that, just because I think it sounds a little bit better. I have the Oxford dynamics going on because there's a nice limiter in there and all kinds of other stuff. That's it for those settings. The basic idea behind that, there's actually much more to it, and it always comes down to your experience and your taste, and that you use your ears first before you use any fancy analyzing tools and stuff like that.